Hello. I think the second session is supposed to start at 3:15. Is that correct? Let me just make sure. I think we should just start just to make sure we finish before it gets too late. All right. Hello. I am John Brammer. I'm an English teacher at Northwood High School in Silver Spring. And I'm just posting some links to the chat for your benefit. Um, there's some, here's the link to the slides. There's a survey. There's a hyperdoc with some resources in it. And I posted a Jamboard for people to share ideas, but I didn't really get any takers last session. So that's cool. We'll, we'll leave that up in case people want to post to it, but okay. So this session is about gamification and building classroom community through collaborative competition, which is a bit of a word salad, I'm realizing now, but hopefully it will all become clear as we go through the slides. And so thanks for attending. I know it's late. You guys have been working all day. Hopefully this is interesting and entertaining and useful for you. Here's some links for you. I wanted to post these at the beginning so that people aren't rushing to get out at the end. You can take a look. There's a link to a Google Doc I created that's I really just threw it together today. It's got some links to some resources you can use. And this is not an exhaustive list. I'm probably going to add some stuff to it later. I also posted a link to a Jamboard that if people want to share games or fun activities related to your content that you've used that have been successful. And then the last link is a link to the EdCamp survey. So you could do that at the end, or you could do it while I'm talking. Whatever is fine. Exit ticket at the beginning. So the outcomes for this session, I wanted to first just go over some of the general concepts and rationales behind gamification and collaborative competition, and then share some practical ideas that you can hopefully use in your classroom. And this is actually a good time of year to introduce this because the school year is winding down. Students' energy levels starting to fade, starting to drop off. And so if you're looking for something to do the last few weeks of school that is fun, that you can kind of experiment and play around with to see how it works, maybe you want to try at the beginning of next school year, this is a good time to do that. So what is gamification? So I posted a couple links to TED Talks here. We're not going to watch those. But basically, they give an overview of this concept of gamification is taking game mechanics and using them in non-gaming contexts. So the second TED Talk is by Jane McGonigal. It's pretty famous. She talks about how gaming or game mechanics can be applied to solve all kinds of different world problems, from like global warming to economic issues to diplomatic issues. And so in terms of classroom gamification, it's integrating play as a learning strategy. And a big part of that is using extrinsic motivation, most commonly in the form of badges, points, prizes, to promote engagement. So some of the caveats, some of the kind of obstacles I've run across, like with this gamification approach, is that extrinsic motivation does not always lead to intrinsic motivation, which means like you have these immediate rewards that you're getting, but the intrinsic motivation is actually the value of the learning, the knowledge and skills that you're acquiring. And there's not always that transition. Like my son's in kindergarten right now, and his teacher uses Class Dojo as a behavior management gamification type of app. So she gives students dojo points for certain behaviors that they like. Did you help your table mate? Did you clean up your materials? And he's really into it, but the problem is he's almost more focused on getting the points than figuring out why he got the points. And I think it's like effective for younger kids who are just trying to figure out how to act in public around other people. But the it might not be as appropriate for high school students. So also, I did a very cursory look into the research on gamification. It's pretty mixed. It's pretty inconclusive what the value is, because a lot of it depends on the learning style of the students. And, different games appeal to different people and different personality types. Some people prefer to play, Wordle by themselves. Some people like to do first person shooters, for example. And so, this is definitely not a one size fits all approach. You got to kind of be flexible. You got to kind of look at your group of students and think about what's going to work for them. So I just recommend, getting to know them first and before you dive in, and just be flexible. The first couple years I tried this, I felt like I had as many failures as successes, and so it's worth just giving it a shot and seeing how it works, and then you can adapt it later on. So, like I mentioned Class Dojo earlier, but these are some popular gamification apps that people use. Wearing a Fitbit is technically gamifying your life because you're rewarding yourself for the amount of activity you do. But Duolingo, people know about. It's like a language learning app, and the thing with all of these is that it's giving you kind of that immediate feedback that you get from playing a game. So you get those points, get those visual cues, you get badges. There's usually a leaderboard that you can have with your friends to see who's in first place. And then sometimes there's like an actual prize that you win at the end. But like I said, this really does emphasize the extrinsic motivation. And I was like, is there a way to do this that can be more focused on the intrinsic motivation and also social learning and collaboration? So I'm calling this the collaborative competition model. And this might be something that is pretty obvious to you or common sense. So I apologize in advance if what I'm going to talk about next is nothing that revolutionary. But the idea is really having students in groups throughout the course of a time period, whether it's a unit or a quarter or a semester, and having them have this kind of like ongoing competition between groups. And the crucial element is having that like bond form within a group and having that social learning going on where the groups are the group members, the team members are supporting each other and helping each other achieve their learning objectives. And the collaboration aspect of it, the social learning aspect of it are integrated into the classroom structures and routines. That's really key because a lot of times people will play games in classrooms. It's kind of like a time filler, or like, oh, we've got a half day today, so let's play Kahoot. Or, we've got a unit test coming up, so let's play Jeopardy. And it's kind of like, it doesn't feel like it's part of the classroom structure routine. It's kind of like, let's fill in this time here with this activity. So if the more you can think about it as part of your routine, the more it's going to be kind of enjoyable and meaningful for the kids, I think. And another key point is that students are both individually and collectively accountable. So, everything, a lot of the accountability at school is based on the individual. What grade did you get on this assessment? But what I like about this model is that you're also kind of emphasizing that actually you're not alone here. You've got these other group members that are here to support you, learn what you need to learn to be successful. So I'm sharing this article with you. There's a link here. It's also in the hyperdoc. I just thought this was a really good editorial where it talks about what was lost during the pandemic for a lot of our kids. Being at home, a lot of the structure that they got from school was just taken away completely. And so they were kind of left to figure out this new kind of paradigm of learning on Zoom. And this writer is basically saying that, this is one of the primary values of school is having that like really meaningful structure where kids know what to expect, and that there's like, this consistency there where they come into English class and this is how the teacher greets them and this is the kind of activities that they'll be doing. So yeah, you can, the article's linked there, but feel free to read that on your own time. No homework or anything. But when you're thinking about how to kind of plan for collaborative competition, you want to think about what is the actual structure of your course. What do you do for your daily, weekly unit planning? What class routines do you follow? I like to do daily warm-ups. And in fact, I've been doing with my seniors like kind of high-end grammar warm-ups, and they've been doing it in groups, and it's actually pretty interesting because I actually teach a lot of former ESOL students, and their grammar skills are more advanced than the students in the class who are native English speakers. And so this is kind of a chance, like in this small group, for them to kind of show off and show that, hey, I can do this. I know how to write a compound complex sentence that does this, right? And so it really, a lot of times in classes where you have former ESOL students, they tend to be a little bit shy or not as willing to participate because they're kind of self-conscious about language skills. But having them, doing these warm-ups and like having them share out their answers, like it helps build up that confidence. So that's one example of how a routine, and especially in a group where they're working together, can help build that community. If you have a journal time, weekly labs, how can you modify these things to make them work in a group? And a lot of times you involve just like small group discussion or share out, having some kind of collaborative problem solving process where, and I feel like in a lot of science classes, this is just natural. People work, you have them working on labs and groups anyways, but how can you also add like maybe an element of competition to it? So one of the key points for adopting this framework is figuring out what your groups are going to be. And I don't recommend doing random groups because like you'll probably find out that you'll have to change them around at some point. There's going to be some kind of issue where you have a bunch of friends together and they won't stop talking about being off topic. So you kind of have to plan this out ahead of time. You want to try to make the groups balanced, heterogeneous, equitable. You want to create support structures for students who need them. So, having someone in the group who might be more advanced and can help students who might be struggling with a certain skill. You want to try to keep the competition fair. You don't want one team to run away with it before, in the second week before you actually get started. And then you want to do, getting to know your students, avoiding like cliques, personal drama, that kind of thing. Sometimes things will come up where you do have to rearrange groups. One suggestion I have is that I give out a Google Form survey at the beginning of the quarter or the semester, just to kind of collect information about their interests, their collaboration style, and using that to kind of strategically put kids together. I will say, like as a caveat, I teach on level 12, and most of my classes are very male centric. Like it's probably 80 or 90% males to females, and so keeping that in mind, like I want to make sure that the students are comfortable in their group, and that's the first priority. It's not so much about like, oh, I'm like social engineering this whole process so that we have these perfect ideal groups. At the end of the day, you want the kids to be talking to each other and not feel uncomfortable. So you got to kind of think about that as well. One other thing is you want to make sure like you're not being a dictator too much and by just saying these are the groups, live with it. I always give a proposed setup of groups on a Friday and say, think about it over the weekend. If you see any issues with this, like send me an email or let me know before class on Monday, and I'll try to take your feedback into account. But ultimately, students need to know that you have final say, because this is a life skill. I always say, I work in a PLC with other teachers. I don't get to choose who's on my PLC. This is something you're going to have to deal with throughout life, is you're going to be collaborating with people from different backgrounds who have different beliefs, systems, et cetera. And how do you make that work? So, again, probably pretty obvious. You want to do some team building activities. These can be quick. Like all of these types of competition activities do not need to be period long. elaborate scavenger hunts or escape rooms, or things that take up a lot of time. You can make them very quick. You can do like a huddle at the beginning of class and say, which do you like better, pancakes or waffles? Discuss. And you could do quick warm up responses. Have people share out their warm up responses for points. I like this activity that I actually shared this in the HyperDoc as well. The True Colors. This is a Google Sheet that actually tallies up like different personality traits. So they fill out you have to follow the instructions, but basically students like identify their own personality traits, and it gives them a color, and then they go through to each tab at the bottom and they check off which traits most apply to them. And at the end, they get a tally of their score of which color is most associated with their personality. And then they would look at what their group members also got. And at the end, there's some discussion questions and a kind of a explanation of what each color indicates. And this was meaningful to have at the beginning, because this is kind of a way to look at different personality styles, how we might collaborate together, what are our potential strengths or weaknesses, things we need to anticipate as being problems. So feel free to steal that, copy that document if you find it useful. So yeah, these are just some ideas. The huddle thing is, like I said, really quick. It's almost like a 2-minute community circle where you just go around and answer a question to kind of warm up the students. Okay, and so in terms of the planning, I like to, and I got to give props to my RT, Mr. Acosta Fox. We were planning English 12 together a couple years ago. He kind of introduced me to this idea of a weekly structure where every Monday you have the same kind of activity, every Tuesday you have the same kind of activity. And, we have a modified block schedule at Northwood. So Wednesdays, we usually do some kind of like project, group student project, or, it's writing time, conferencing time. I like to do my group challenge competition on Fridays, because that's usually the end of the week where the energy level is the lowest and they kind of need to be re-energized a bit. But you can build in these kind of collaborative activities throughout the week. Like, for example, on Tuesdays, I like doing small groups to crack seminar more than an entire class, because you often get more, like, there's less pressure on individual students. Students just in general feel more comfortable discussing issues with a group that they've kind of gotten to know well, and they've developed that comfort level. There's an app called Bokaroo that I like to use, where if I can't get around to all the groups, they can actually record their discussion on the Chromebook and share the link with me so I can listen to it later, just to see what kinds of things they discussed. So again, you're trying to build this kind of competition into the structure of your week, your unit, your daily planning. I keep a leaderboard. I make a slide for each class, and this goes into my slides for every week, and just kind of update the points as we go along. And I put this slide up every day to say, like, okay, this team's at the lead. Here's your chance to catch up. Here's the activity we're doing today. Here's how many points it's going to be worth. So just a few troubleshooting questions, things that I've run into that have been kind of recurring problems with this setup. And this is like a typical problem with group work in general, is that you put students together in a group, and sometimes there's a student who just likes to dominate and wants to take over and wants to answer everything. So you have people who also like to hide, who like to let other people kind of, stay in the spotlight. So there are strategies to deal with that. And I would say, like, in terms of group work, you want to make sure that the students know that every member of the group is accountable for knowing the content, but also that the group is accountable for every single member. So it's like, I might randomly call someone and they should know the answer, not because they necessarily came up with it on their own, but because their group members helped them come up with it, or they collaborated together to figure out that answer. So keeping the random calling, but having them within a group. So go like group 3, number one student, what's the answer? And then the group knows that that person should know it because they've discussed it in their group, and everybody kind of is able to answer that question. Pass the paper is a similar type of idea, where, if they're doing something in writing, having, having a piece of paper to pass around. When I play Jeopardy, like, if you've probably played Jeopardy, the students sometimes can go insane about Jeopardy, and they're just yelling out answers. And so I like to actually have them write their answers down. And so I have a score sheet here that put a question up on the board, and they have to answer that question, if they know it. And then they would pass the sheet to the next person for the next question. So that's a way to kind of make sure everyone has a chance to be accountable. And then, if you're doing any kind of group project, lit circles, et cetera, try to think about what kinds of roles the students could play and give them rotating roles so that everyone has a chance to be the leader for a given activity. Okay, next troubleshooting problem. What happens if a team falls too far behind or gives up? So this has happened to me. Like a team gets 10 points behind, they're like, oh, we have no chance to win now. So we're just going to stop. What I tell them at the beginning of this is that, there's this concept called relegation in soccer, where if you're the last place team, you drop down to the league below. And so it's kind of similar to this. Like I'll say, by the end of the month, whoever's in the last place will be relegated, and we're going to dissolve that group and put you into different groups. So you don't necessarily need to follow through with that. Only in the situation where a team is completely lost at sea, and you might need to dissolve them and try to split them up just so that they are motivated to help their new group. And the last issue that comes up a lot for me is like if you have a very large class and just figuring out groups gets really complicated. What I would say about that is like don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. In fact, in order to save time, what I would do is, on Canvas, you can create groups and it will randomly create a group of 5 for you. You can just go ahead and do that and then just move kids around. You can say, oh, these two shouldn't be together, or, oh, we need a leader in this group, and just kind of like play around with it a little bit to see what the best setup is for you. But I wouldn't spend hours trying to figure out what your groups are going to be. So this is, I think, is the least important part, because this is like the conclusion of, if you're doing this competition over the course of a quarter or a semester, you want to have some kind of acknowledgement or recognition for the winners. I always think the kids get the most out of the appreciation and the recognition more than saying like, oh, here's some candy or something, so if you could set up some kind of day of celebration where the winning team gets recognized, you can have some kind of potluck celebration. You can have an award ceremony. You can give them an opportunity of doing a fun activity. So, like I said, this to me is not the most important part, but the kids really do appreciate something to kind of like a culminating activity at the end to recognize them. And I also think it's important for them to reflect after the period of time when you're doing the competition. I like to do it for a quarter and end at the quarter break, just because like it gives kids a chance to work with other people in the class, and that it doesn't become too I don't know, clicky, I guess. So at the end of the period of time where you're going to go back to different groups, or you're going to go back to individual learning, just have them reflect on how they did in their group. These are very kind of cliche, basic reflection questions, but try to keep it positive. Students like to complain, but if they really think about it, they'll think that they actually, it was a meaningful experience to work with some of their classmates. All right, so just a reminder that, oh, sorry, I skipped the slide. Final thoughts. So I would say that this is something that has really re-energized my teaching, just because like I'm big on structure and routine, but a common complaint I hear from students is that high school, it can be too repetitive. It can be too much of a routine. There's too much of the kind of dry learning and not enough of the kind of like interaction, the social interaction that they desire, the fun stuff that they desire. I just like over my years of teaching, I've just learned that like I enjoy listening to the students so much more than I like talking to them. And just walking around and listening to their discussions, you hear some amazing things, some brilliant things, some hilarious things, some inappropriate things. But there's so much benefit from those student-to-student interactions that that should really be the center, I think, of the classroom community. So those are basically my final thoughts. Here are the resources again. I'm gonna just copy these links back into the chat in case people came in late and need the resources. But I appreciate you guys coming, and got a few minutes left. If anybody wants to stick around and add any ideas to the Jamboard that's posted, you can, or take the survey. But thank you so much.